What's up, San Diego? Good morning to all of you on really the first day that feels like fall in America's finest city. A little chilly out there. Had a little bit of rain last night, and this morning the ground was wet when I was driving into work. Kind of starts to feel like fall weather here in San Diego, moving into winter weather, moving into holiday weather, as I have all the Christmas decorations here at the 97 Through the Fan studio. I have a couple of Christmas trees behind me. They did a great job with decorating the place. I'm not necessarily on board with decorating for Christmas before Thanksgiving. I'm all about, honestly, I'm about that decoration that I saw on social media the other day where, you know, like those inflatable decorations that you put on your yard. You know, they have turkey. They have a giant turkey, right? Wearing a pilgrim's hat, and then they have like Santa Claus and all that stuff. I saw one where they had the Santa Claus pinned down and tied up with the turkey sitting on top of the Santa Claus, with the turkey holding a sign saying, "Not your not yet, fat man," which I thought was kind of funny. That's how I kind of feel on the Christmas decorations before Thanksgiving. But once Thanksgiving happens, feel free, 100%, to dive into some Christmas cheer and some holiday spirit with some Christmas decorations. So starting to feel that way here in San Diego. Usually around this time, we start getting some moves in Major League Baseball. On the hot stove, it is the cold stove. It is very cold stove. We're going to talk about that later on in the show, probably in the next hour when it comes to baseball offseason news. There's not a lot of baseball offseason news to talk about. We could talk about the Padres and everything that they need to go address, but how much money are they going to spend? That's a big question. That's a question that we don't know the answer to. And until they start kind of making some moves to point us in the direction, you're never really going to know. It's just kind of a guess right now. So with not knowing how much you can spend, it's hard to be like, yeah, well, maybe they should go get this guy, or they should trade for this guy, or they should go after this guy. Crazy. It's a crazy task to try to be able to put that together. We're going to try to do it later on in the show coming up in the next hour. But I really want to start the day off with college football because yesterday in college football was insane. Yesterday is for all of those people like myself. And I know like Jake Waters in the chat. And if you haven't chimed in yet or you haven't seen it before, we are on YouTube. We're on YouTube each and every Sunday morning. All of our shows here on 97 Through the Fan are on YouTube. But if I look at the chat, and Jake Waters in the chat, big college football fan. Yesterday was a perfect day for us college football fans that say all the time, this is why you play the game. This is why you play all these games. This is why, you can't just go off of, well, if Alabama played Oklahoma, what would the spread be? Oh, the spread would be about, 14 points. Well, it's funny. Alabama did have a pretty, I don't have it off the top of my head. I forgot what the spread was yesterday. But it's pretty funny. Alabama was, if they were to play Oklahoma, they'd beat them up. They'd be a 14-point favorite. Why would we ever put them in the playoff? And I'm not saying put Oklahoma in the playoff, but you could say the same thing about a lot of these games. This is why you play the game. This is why you play the game. I mean, the entire week last week in college football, the entire week was all about the SEC and how great the SEC is. And when the SEC beats up on each other, it's the greatest thing for college football. And it just shows how great they are. And when any other conference beats up on each other, it's like, well, they're all just kind of bad. They're all just not very good. This is why you play the games. Oklahoma beats Alabama last night in Norman 24-3. It knocks Alabama to 8-3 on the year. Florida hosts Ole Miss. They won 24-17. Knocks Ole Miss to 8-3 on the year. 5-5 Florida beat Ole Miss. Ole Miss was a favorite in this game. Why play the game? This is why you play the game. For almost 3 quarters, the game between Georgia and Massachusetts was like interesting. And then Georgia finally rolled Massachusetts. Other games to show this is why you play the game. 5-5 Minnesota took Penn State on the ropes last night. Penn State wins in Minnesota 26-25. Texas A&M. Texas A&M that had a really good chance of controlling their own destiny for an SEC championship game goes to Auburn and loses to 4-6 Auburn in overtime, 43-41 in 4 overtimes. This is why you play the games. I mean, I already know the narrative this week. We'll talk about it later on the show. This week, the whole case is going to be, and it's already on the front page of ESPN.com. You go to ESPN.com on the college football page. First thing, projecting the college football top 25 after week 13, : where does 3-loss Alabama land? How can 3-loss Alabama potentially make the playoff? That's going to be the talking point. Is 3-loss Alabama better than Indiana? I think everybody would say, oh, well, probably. They play in the SEC. It's so much harder to win in Norman than it is for Indiana to play Purdue. And that's the other thing that's funny, is they always talk about all these hard places it is to play in the SEC that are usually teams in the middle of the standings. And then they compare them to, like, the worst team in the other conferences. Like, when are people going to realize that playing at Florida is way tougher than playing at Purdue? Well, Florida's not in last right now in the SEC. I mean, you already had Nick Saban say it's not hard to win in Alabama. Not hard to win at Vanderbilt. And then they ended up losing to Vanderbilt this year, which is funny. I mean, any other year, you could just be like, Purdue, Vanderbilt, kind of the same thing in terms of losing there. But those are just the SEC games that went awry. There was plenty other college football carnage yesterday. You could basically call the Big 12 the Carnage 12 now in college football. It is the Carnage 12. There is a high possibility that next week you have an 8-way tie for second place out of a conference that has 16 schools. There could be 8 teams that are 6-3 in conference when it's all said and done in the Big 12. With so many different tie-breaking scenarios. Dennis Dodd put out the updated the Big 12 tiebreakers. And by the way, up until Iowa State beat Utah last night, my TCU Horned Frogs somehow were still alive in the Big 12 championship game. After Iowa State beat Utah, it eliminated any type of tie. They don't win any tiebreakers from there on out. But here are the tiebreakers in the Big 12 conference. 4 teams are tied at 6-2, which is BYU, Arizona State, Colorado, and Iowa State. If they all win out, Arizona State and Iowa State go to the Big 12 championship game. 2 schools that were not even close to being near the top of the Big 12 come the media preseason poll. That's how much you got to that's how much these preseason polls mean absolutely nothing. And really skews a lot of results for the end of the year when we start talking about ranked wins and non-ranked wins. Arizona State was projected to come in last place in the Big 12. Yesterday, after their big win against BYU at home, they're 6-2 in conference and are 1 win away from making the Big 12 title game. Iowa State, projected to be kind of in the middle of the Big 12. They're 1 win away from being in the Big 12 title game. All of those teams at 6-2, if they all win out, would be Arizona State and Iowa State in terms of tiebreakers. That's assuming they all win. However, that doesn't account for losses by each of those schools on the final day. Also, as Dennis Dodd points out in his tweet, there is still a possibility of a 5, 6, 7, or 8-way tie. There are still 5 teams below those particular 4 teams at 5 and 3, being TCU, Baylor, maybe Texas Tech, 2 if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Baylor, Kansas State, TCU, Texas Tech, West Virginia, all 5 and 3. In an 8-way tie, there are 256 scenarios of how it could play out from the Big 12 office. If any 2 teams end up 7 and 2, they're in the Big 12. That means in the current 4-team tie, if 2 of those teams win, you have your championship game. If 3 lose, you've got at least 1 team. Example, Colorado's still alive because if it wins, it would need any 2 of the remaining 3 teams to lose to clinch a spot. Same for Iowa State, BYU, and Arizona State. Suffice to say, Arizona State and Iowa State are in the best positions from Dennis Dodd. That's just the Big 12. It's all kinds of carnage throughout college football. Other big scores yesterday impacting college football. We talked about the Big 12. I mean, Kansas obliterates Colorado yesterday at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City. 37-21. I mean, Colorado, as if you were listening to the radio before it came on from the national programming, they played the post-game press conference of Deion Sanders for Colorado, saying we fumbled our destiny and fumbled our opportunity for the road in front of us. And they did. 37-21. I mean, they look like, as mentioned on the previous show, and I totally agree, they look like the Colorado we saw lose to Nebraska. They look like the Colorado that should have lost to North Dakota State. They look like the Colorado that just had been putting around in some of the big games. They go out to Kansas and they lose. And they were right there, ready to go to the Big 12 championship game. Arizona State beats BYU yesterday, 28-23. I mean, just insane games in college football. Boise State, who is ranked 12th in the country right now, who the college football playoff thinks is better than the Big 12 potential champion, goes to 2-8 Wyoming and beats them by 4 points. We're just going to assume that they're better than the Big 12 champ. They go to Wyoming, who's 2-9 on the now 2-9 on the year, and they win 17-13. With arguably the Heisman Trophy winner in their backfield. It's a perfect example why you play the games. This is a perfect example, by the way, of why you got to get humans out of this entire process. I saw, I used to cover the Pac-12 for a long time. He's on Twitter, John Wilner. John Wilner tweeted out today, or yesterday, there's no, I got to pull it up because it's just so ridiculous. Wilner Hotline. This guy's got a vote in the AP Top 25. Indiana, who got smoked by Ohio State yesterday, which is their only loss, and it's to the number 2 team in the country on the road at the Horseshoe. John Wilner says Indiana has no business making the playoff as an at-large team, none. Why play the games? I know I keep saying this is why you play the game, but why play the game? Do I think Indiana's very good? No, I don't. I really don't. I think they've had a great season. I think they've been the benefactor of a very lousy Big Ten schedule that they had received. They didn't play anybody in their non-conference worth a lick. Florida International, Western Illinois, Charlotte, sick. They played Big Ten opponents of UCLA, Maryland, Northwestern, Nebraska, a Washington team that's not very good this year, Michigan State, Michigan. A loss to Ohio State, and now they got Purdue next week. That's a pretty lousy schedule at the end of the year. But the problem with this is Washington was expected to be a lot better. Michigan just won the national championship a year ago. Northwestern was on the top half of the Big Ten last year. I mean, it's not Indiana's fault that these teams decided to, like, these teams they didn't decide, but these teams this year ended up laying an egg. That's not Indiana's fault. They beat the teams on their schedule. Schedules are planned so far in advance. 8-10 years ago, do you think Indiana should have been scheduling Alabama? Probably not. They've had a pretty impressive season. They won on the field. Their only losses to Ohio State. Do they have any marquee wins? Probably not. But their only loss is the number 2 team in the country. How do you evaluate Indiana? We're going to go by the eye test? We're going to go by the eye test? You mean that same eye test that still thinks all these SEC schools would win if they played anybody else because the SEC is so great? I'm not saying this, but I'm just asking the question. What if the SEC just sucks? What if they just suck? What if they're just a mediocre conference that has a bunch of logos that people recognize? Is there any way in proving they don't? All they do is play each other, and then they don't play anybody out of conference. And when they do, it's in neutral site games in southeast of the United States, in southeast country, in the SEC country. They don't go out and play schools out on the West Coast. They don't go out and play schools in the Big Ten on the road. They play a lot of schools at home or in SEC country. I'm just saying. I mean, I know they are good. I'm not saying they suck. But the question has to be asked, what if they do suck? There's be no way of finding out if they suck or not. There's no way. You can't. They don't play anybody else. They all play themselves. And it's great football games. It's great parody. But for me, I find it hard to believe. And I'm tired of the narrative. And I said this on my show last week about the whole, follow the money and you'll understand why certain conferences get the love that they get. Why is it okay to say when the SEC beats up on each other, it's good? But when the Big Ten, I'm not even a Big Ten fan, but when the Big Ten and the ACC and the Big 12 do it, it's like, well, they got a bunch of mediocre teams. It's all setting up for a couple of things. Expanding the playoff is one, but the other is they need to be able to find a way, and they'll never do it because, again, it's an invitational. They want to be able to control what teams are in the playoff. There should never be any human element to determining who makes the playoff. Let the humans seed the playoff, but let the players on the field make the playoff. And the SEC only plays 8 conference games. Everybody else plays 9. Or most ever conferences play 9. Unless you're in the Pac-2 and you only play 1. But I digress on that. Lots more I can get to on college football. I want to get your phone calls, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. I think a lot of this stuff is going to start balancing itself out with the transfer portal and contracts and all that stuff coming to college athletics. But I take a deeper dive. I mean, I cannot wait for the narrative this week. Why a 3-loss SEC team deserves to be in the playoff over 1-loss Indiana. We're going to talk more about that, how it affects the landscape of college football, and more on the Braden Soprano Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning from 8 to 10, San Diego's number one sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Braden's Predator Show live and local each every Sunday morning from 8 to 10. We're going to be off next Sunday for the holiday. I need a break, guys. I'm sorry. I need some rest after the long football season that it's been. A lot of stuff going on, doing a lot of things. Like today, I'm gonna go home after the show, try to get a nap in before I got to cruise over to University of San Diego for a basketball game. The Toreros are in action this afternoon. Kid plays basketball and want to see some college basketball up close. USD Idaho this afternoon at 2 o'clock. Come out and support the Toreros. Tough sledding for the Toreros early on this year, so see if they can bounce back against Idaho. Love the participation in the chat. Be sure to give us a like on the YouTube if you haven't done that already. Give us a like. Click the like button. As we talk a lot of college football this morning, we'll talk some Padres baseball in the 9 o'clock hour, as well as a preview of the National Football League with some actives and inactives for the morning slate of games, and maybe some of the inactives for the afternoon games if they have been, those ones that are for sure before they start making some game time decisions. So. Let's talk some more college football. I do want to get to your phone calls. Let's get out to Mitch in New Jersey. Mitch, what's going on? How's your Sunday morning?
Oh, it's going pretty good. How you doing, Brandon?
Doing all right, Mitch. What do you got for me today? Talking college football?
Oh, college football was in great. I wish Georgia had one more loss, by the way, because Ole Miss City gave them, sock it to them. But my old ex-USC Trojan quarterback, Jackson Dart, I think he had one of his worst games. That's not the norm. He threw 2 interceptions. One was overthrown, but then he proceeded to throw another interception. That was kind of comical.
Yeah, he threw 3 picks in about 2 minutes, and one of them didn't even count because it was overturned.
Overturned, right? Yeah, I thought it was kind of comical. Maybe had to be some miscommunication. Maybe the wide receiver, was a lot of noise, but I guess I'm making excuses. Just that one game in Florida. Now that's going to help them recruit. But I didn't like in college football. I'm sorry.
100%. It's hard to win in the swamp. My brother went down there to watch a game a couple of years ago when he was at Tennessee. He said it was one of the coolest college football atmospheres he had ever been to. It's hard to win. Hard to win on the road in conference. Not just the SEC, but just in general. It's hard to win on the road in conference in any type of college athletic.
This breaking up the Pac-12 is just ridiculous. But it's made these other conferences stronger, so somebody can pass up this. Yeah, I think the Big Ten is the best conference. But Cal's got themselves a good quarterback. And AC's been pretty good with Miami. Also came from the Pac-12 and Cam Ward. He'll be a top 12 pick, maybe a top 5. Maybe he's got Ray written all over him. Him and Shedeur Sanders.
Shedeur Sanders from Colorado.
The Big 12 has been really exciting. I mentioned leave it last week, but you got to also mention Sanders. He's right. They blew it. That was a couple of cheap shots that I saw against Sanders. I mean, how did he not even get thrown out of the game for that? Going after the guy's knee. Really intense one.
Well, I thought that hit was a little late too, Mitch. But you can't hit him high, you can't hit him low. I mean, the hit was late, but the area of the hit. I mean. You're trying to physically put another grown man on the ground against his will. You can't do it in a nice way.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to see flag football, but it's like he just threw himself at the guy.
Hey, you're right, Mitch. It was late. It was 100% late.
The Big 12 has been really exciting. And, of course, next year I have to get myself over to any of these USC games. Even these Chile, because I know that area a little better. I've never ventured south of Wilshire Boulevard when I lived in the 80s. I know I'm old. I am. But there'll be plenty of tickets available, and I'm sure the airlines are begging for customers.
Yeah, 100%.
Happy Thanksgiving.
All right, happy Thanksgiving, Mitch, to you and your family. Appreciate the phone call. Yeah, there was a lot of late hits on Shedeur yesterday. But again, it's like you can't. If you want to say the hits were late, I'll buy it. I'm in on that. I thought that hit was late. I thought it was kind of dirty that it was that late. But if you go in high, it's targeting. If you go in low, it's like, well, you can't take out his. It's like, where do you want him to tackle? I mean, it's always an impossible task to try to tackle anybody in football nowadays. College, NFL, I mean, they've made all these rules. I mean, it is a carnage gladiator type sport, guys. I mean, that's what the sport is. You can't make a violent sport non-violent. I got that phrase from my dad. I love it. It's so true. The game of football and rugby, for that matter, you are trying to put another human being on the ground forcibly against their will. How are you going to do that in a nice way in anything? Making a human do something they don't want to do against their will in a nice way. It's like that's not something you can do. It's not possible. Yet we try to make that task. Well, we gotta, he kind of right here, like perfect form every time. I mean, yes, I'm all about good form tackling. I'm not about leading with your head, and spearing guys. But after a while, I mean, sometimes you're going so fast, it's so hard to do. I'd like to see somebody that disagrees with me try to do the things that they want athletes to do, especially defensively. I'm all ears. I'd love to see the technique for that. But a lot of these hits, man, it's playing the game. It's playing the game. Speaking of playing the game, this is why you play said games. I mean, we have all of these tiebreakers now that are in conversation, right? Talked about the Big 12. The Big 12 is so much fun to watch because every team has a chance every single week. Arizona, Utah, and Oklahoma State were all expected to win the Big 12 conference. They're 2-6, 1-7, and 0-8 in Big 12 play. You got Kansas upsetting Colorado. You got teams like TCU that can't beat UCF or Houston, but they could go out there and beat schools like Texas Tech and Kansas. Arizona State 6-2 in conference right now, sitting at the top part of the conference. I start looking at some of what it's going to shape out to be. What I'm expecting for Tuesday when they announce the college football playoff rankings, and these are going to be crazy because the results we had, and we're going in a rivalry week during Thanksgiving where it could be even more carnage. But you're looking at Oregon number 1 as a potential conference champ. Texas number 2 is a potential conference champ. Miami number 3 is a potential conference champ. And then it's, you're going to put the Big 12 champion there, or are they going to put Boise State there? I mean, what do most schools do against Wyoming? And here's the deal. This is where you start bringing the human element in. Now I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. What do you expect Arizona State to do at Wyoming? They'd probably throttle Wyoming. But Boise State wins by 4. These are the dumb conversations we're having right now when they should just let it play out on the field and then you could seed it later. Boise State will probably be the 4 seed. Ohio State 5, Penn State 6. Notre Dame is probably expected to be 7. What has Notre Dame done this year to deserve being the 7th best team in the country? That's the 7th seed. They'd probably be 6 in the rankings. They beat A&M. I mean, do we forget that they lost to Northern Illinois? Did we just flush that out of the system? Yeah, you know what? It's going to flush that out. Going to flush that out of the system. We're going to pretend like that game didn't happen. I mean, Notre Dame has one of the worst losses out of any team competing for a playoff spot right now. A 16-14 loss at home to a team that's at the bottom of the MAC. They beat Purdue. They beat Miami of Ohio. Hey, good win against Louisville, who was ranked at the time. I didn't think Louisville's ranked anymore. Stanford, sick. Georgia Tech. Navy was ranked at the time. Florida State, Virginia. They just beat Army. I mean, I think Army's a really good story. And I was hoping Army could, make it a game or potentially beat Notre Dame. But if you're hanging your hat on wins against Army, I don't understand what we're doing here. I get with Notre Dame. If you're going to tell me how great the Texas A&M win is, you can't tell me that Northern Illinois, the loss to Northern Illinois happened so long ago it doesn't matter. If that's the case, then the team that beat A&M isn't the same team that's playing right now. An A&M team that just lost to Auburn, by the way. The point of all of these, the point of all this that I'm saying is just stop having humans decide who deserves to be in the playoff, especially present athletic directors and people a part of the committee that have opportunities to gain money out of the situation. There should be no active ADs a part of this thing. I have a couple fixes to the college football playoff. I talked about it on my show on Monday, America's Finest Football Show. We will be airing the last America's Finest Football Show tomorrow. Last one of the year. But we got some serious chaos in college football. And my idea on how to fix it, it doesn't matter. It's one man's opinion. There's thousands of these ideas. They never happen because of red tape, bureaucracy, and politics when it comes to the big boys in college athletics. But the big thing of what makes the NFL so great is the fact that you can win any single Sunday. And right now in college football, you kind of have a little bit of that. And I think you're going to continue to have a little bit more of that with some of this NIL and some of these, the transfer portal. I think a lot of that needs to be cleaned up. But why? Everything should be an automatic qualifier, and it's eventually going to get there. But a 2014 playoff is probably what college football needs. And there's a way to do it that makes a lot of sense that honestly checks a box for everything that people want in college football. The traditionalists, the newer era of college football fans like me, and all the conferences that like to get their money of being in the tournament. I'm going to tell you what that idea is when we come back on the Braden Soprenet Show, live and local every Sunday morning from 8 to 10 on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Braden's Apprentice Show live and local each and every Sunday morning. Appreciate all of you making our morning a part of yours. Taking you up to 10 o'clock and some NFL football. Starting at 10, we're going to get you the ins and outs, who's in, who's out, coming up in the next hour once the active and inactive list gets sent out by all the NFL teams. We're going to give you a Week 12 preview, and we're also going to talk a little Padres baseball in the next hour. But I want to talk about what I teased going to break, and that was, ways that you could fix this college football fiasco when it comes to the way this is seated. And a lot of it, and again, I think that you should allow the teams to decide who makes the playoff on the field instead of a committee, and then let the committee fill out the seeds based on the rules that they are given. So for me, a lot of the chaos right now and a lot of the problems are with all these tiebreakers in these massive conferences. And the thing is with these massive conferences is you need divisions. But they got rid of divisions because they got greedy and they wanted to have the best two teams in the conference championship games to give them the best chance at making the college football playoff. Nobody wants to get rid of the conference championship games, though, because it makes too much money, right? We need the 13th game? I don't really think you do. But the first order of business is all of these conferences that have more than 12 schools need to have divisions, because you need to play some sort of a similar schedule, and you can't do that with these giant conferences. And then it puts you in just absolute tie-breaking hell. I mean, next week there is a good possibility that you have a 7-2 team in the Big 12 and 8 schools with a 6-3 record tied for second place. And not every one of those schools played the same teams. They're all over the place in that conference. A 16-team conference. The ACC's got 17 teams in it. 17 teams. You need divisions. First order of business, go back to divisions and conferences. And here's the thing, and one of my friends, and this is what he brought up, right? He's a Penn State fan. Again, I have put together something that considers everything. He goes, no, we can't go back to divisions because Penn State, use Penn State as an example. Penn State's got to play Ohio State, Michigan every year. And it's almost impossible to win the it's way harder than it is in the Big Ten West. Well, do what high schools do. In high school football out here in California, especially in San Diego, they redo the leagues every 3 years in their conferences. There's a city conference that has 20 high schools in it. There's a North County group. There is an East County group. There's a South Bay group. There's a small school group. And in those conferences, they have multiple divisions, which they call leagues. So in the city conference, every couple of years, they reshuffle it, and based on a rating system, which they have, I mean, they have RPI, they have all these different rating systems to evaluate teams, you can, every 3 years, shuffle the deck on the divisions. Where you go, all right, here's how the teams performed the last 3 years. We're going to go 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, all the way down. Split the divisions up. I did that with a lot of these conferences from last season. So if you take last season's results and apply them to this year in terms of my plan with the Big Ten, we're going to take the Big Ten as an example. It's a little bit easier. They got 18 teams, so 9-9. Everybody plays their teams in their division, an 8-game schedule. And I'm going to tell you about the 9th game in a second. But how that would shape out would be, one division would be Indiana, Ohio State, Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois, Rutgers, Michigan, Nebraska, Michigan State. The other one, Oregon, Penn State, Washington, Wisconsin, USC, UCLA, Northwestern, Maryland, Purdue. And what I did was it's just like how it finished last year is, Michigan, Ohio State, and then it would go 1-1, or it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like, so it would be going across. So the division that starts with the number 1 team would have the 4th team in it, and it would snake, right? So it would be the number 1 team is in Division A, number 2 team and 3 team are in Division B, number 4 team and 5 team are back in A, 6 and 7 are in B, and that way you would have a relatively more balanced divisions than based on location. From that point, you play an 8-game schedule. Again, the Big Ten's the easiest to do it with. For conference play, 8-game conference schedule. And then your last week would be like conference championship week. And in conference championship week, which would be week 12, not an additional week, that's when you would get your opponent from the other division to give you your 9 games. So you still get your conference championship game, but it's not giving you a 13th game. And then that way, in the last week of the year, during Thanksgiving week, you have all of the best matchups because you have all of the evenly caliber teams playing each other. That is great for television, by the way. But you would have, theoretically, I did this last week, so the 2 teams that were undefeated in the divisions that I set were Oregon and Indiana. You would have Oregon play Indiana. And then, for me, I would have, 2 play 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, all the way down. But then, I would have automatic qualifiers, multiple per conference, for a 24-team playoff. The FCS does a 24-team playoff. Why can't the FBS do a 24-team playoff? In high school football, if you want to win a state championship, if you're a team in San Diego, you got to play 16 to 17 games. Minimum. Minimum of 16, max of 17 games to win a state championship in California. That's the same thing in Texas. So in high school, you got to play 16 to 17 games. And at the FCS level, you got to play 16 to 17 games. And in the National Football League, you got to play 16 to 17 games. But for some reason in college football, we can't have the Division I FBS league play 16 to 17 games. Well, I don't know about that. And now all of a sudden we care about safety. You're doing it at every other level. But what I did was I eliminated the conference championship week for an extra game and put it in the regular season schedule. So with that, I would give the Power 4 conferences, ACC, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, automatic qualifiers. And I think based on that, the SEC and the Big Ten kind of run the show to keep them happy, they should have 4 automatic qualifiers each. I think the ACC should have 3. I think the Big 12 should have 3. And then I think, just like the FCS, every other conference should have what their champion should be in for this 24-team playoff. There's only 10 conferences, folks. 4 of them are power conferences. So you'd have 6 teams in there that might not fit. But right now you got Boise State playing well. So now you only got really 5 schools that don't really fit. Well, one of them's Army. Army was ranked going into the year and undefeated. So now you really only have 4 schools that don't belong. And guess what? They're going to be like the last 4 schools in the tournament anyway and be a cupcake game for the first round of the playoffs for some of the high seeds. 2014 bracket will look just like the FCS bracket. You got 8 teams with a first round bye. Everybody else plays in the first round. And what I would do with the conference championship week is, again, some divisions are better than others. For the Big Ten, that would have 4 auto bids. The 2 teams that make the conference championship game would both get a bid. And then what you would do would be the number 2 team for Division I would play the 3 of Division II, and the number 2 of Division II would play the 3 of Division I at the number 2 school host site, and whoever wins that game, those 2 games would be the other 2 teams that automatically qualify for the Big Ten, but for their Big Ten for the Big Ten qualifiers to the playoff. I played it out from last year's results year's results seeded the divisions in the schedule, and this year's results up until last week seeded the playoffs. So the ACC had 3 automatic qualifiers: Miami, SMU, and Clemson. Big 12 had 3: BYU, Colorado, Arizona State. This was all going into last week. Big 10 would have 4: Oregon, Indiana, Penn State, Ohio State. SEC 4: Texas, A&M, Tennessee, Georgia. Army would get in as the American. Jacksonville State is Conference USA. Miami of Ohio, the MAC. Boise State of Mountain West. Washington State is the Pac-12. Louisiana is the Sun Belt. You'd have 4 at-large schools: Notre Dame, Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina at the time of the rankings of the top 25. Seeded out, I think the 4 Power 4 teams should have automatic first-round byes, the 4 Power 4 champions, and then after that, put the at-larges in. Don't make them all conference champions get a first-round bye if it's not deserved. You play a 12-game schedule. The last week is not decided in terms of who you play. You could totally do that. You already do that for the conference championship. And then the last thing I would do is when you have all these games, everybody plays a 9-game schedule going in that format. So then you got 3 non-conference games you play. You can play in a group of 6 school. You can play and then play 2 other Power 4 schools if you're a Power 4 school. And then the best is week 0. Make it a game that doesn't count against an FCS school. Charge it as a preseason game. Somebody make me the commissioner of college football. That's how I would do it. When we come back, we're going to talk some Padres baseball. We'll dive into what they possibly can do, what they should do, how much money they're going to spend, and what the plan should be. Should the Padres be all in for next year? I'll tell you when we come back. Braden Sprennett Show, live and local, every Sunday morning. Hour number 2, final hour of the Braden Soprentice Show, live and local each every Sunday morning from 8 to 10. We're going to talk some Padres baseball later on in the segment, as I promised. Kind of want to just finish that proposal. And if you didn't hear the whole thing, you can go back and listen on the Rewind app. We will have this show in podcast form. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the Braden Soprentice Show on podcast form, wherever you get your podcasts. All new episodes of America's Finest Football Show also appear in that spot as well, the Braden Soprentice Show. So check it out. If you haven't done already, give us a like on the YouTube page. We are on YouTube, so if you're driving around, like what you hear, you'll be able to check us out again on YouTube when you get home or on your phone once you arrive at your destination. To kind of recap this college football playoff proposal that I have, really college football in general. I think you play a 12-game season. I think you have a week 0 bye week, or week 0 preseason game, I should say, against an FCS school. So, because that's the other thing all the time. Playing an FCS school in November, I think, is ridiculous. It's like an extra bye week that the SEC gets on top of the fact that they only play 8 conference games. And then they play 4 non-conference, and then they never really play like 2 or 3 really good opponents. They play like 1, and then they play like, multiple FCS schools or like group of 6 schools and load up on their wins and losses. 12-game schedule like it normally is. Week 0 for everybody is a preseason game that you can play in FCS school if you would like. They're all home games anyway. Nobody travels to an FCS school. Make it a preseason game. Sell the tickets. People will buy them as part of the season ticket package, and people will watch it. Everybody would watch Week 0 only FBS versus FCS. They'd watch it because at that point, people are craving football games because it's the first week of any type of football with the NFL not starting yet. Usually it's like Hawaii playing somebody. And like 3 other games, you're like, oh, college football's back. Kind of, not really. Week 0. That is the time you play an FCS school. Then you get your 3 non-conference games. Schedule them however you like. I do think, because again, with this playoff proposal, it eliminates bowl games. I think bowl games should be at the beginning of the year. Now, the whole idea of a bowl game, though, is about getting people to travel to your city. It's really a touristy thing. It's for getting tourism to your local city in the form of a bowl game by inviting schools to a warm weather destination in like the fall, in the wintertime, right? Like the Holiday Bowl, they get schools from like the ACC and the Pac-12. They used to get some Big Ten schools, but you got like Iowa coming here. Like Iowa would love to come here in the middle of December. So yeah, that's what really bowl games are for. On top of that, some like TV viewership. But at this point in time, if you're not going to, you barely have, if you're not going to have any kid that like is playing the regular season, play in the bowl games, you have to find either start paying everybody bonuses for playing in bowl games or make an incentive for a bowl game. And right now there is really no incentive to play in a bowl game with a playoff. It was a great idea at the time, and I think people made a ton of money off of them. But to me, the only way bowl games survive is if they're at the beginning of the season. So you go preseason FCS, where you play an FCS school at home preseason, gets you an extra home game that you could sell in part of your season tickets. And then week 1 should be bowl game invites. You go ahead and do all the neutral site games. You get the FCS game the week 0 anyway, so everybody starts with the home game to start the year. So you're not gypping the fans. And then week 1, you could do your bowl games. Have all your bowl game and leave week 1 open. And you do all your bowl games. And now you can even add bowl games because you could include everybody. And what you do with the bowl games It's the same thing. It's not like they get the seed. They're all draft picks, right? Like in bowl games, like the Holiday Bowl does not get, the third best Pac-12 school and the fourth best whatever it is. Let's say it's the 2 from the Pac-12 and the 3 from the ACC. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's not like they get the number 2 automatically and then like the 3 automatically. They get to pick. And with the ACC, it's a weird like kind of rotation thing with schools, so you don't get the same schools all the time. But they're basically draft picks. And what you can do with that week 1 game of bowl games is you can have like 3 or 4 months before August. Maybe you could do it in like during spring ball in April. You have a TV show, the bowl game draft, and you figure out where you're playing week 1. Where the invites go. Where are you playing week 1? What bowl game are we going to week 1? Who are we playing against? People would watch the S out of that. I know I would. It's April. All these schedules are way out in advance. I mean, it'd be kind of fun to have 1 week where you're like, hey, who are we playing week 1? Where are we playing it at? I hope it's in Orlando. I hope it's in San Diego. I hope it's in XYZ. I still think people would travel. I know it's hot, though. That's the thing. The difference is the weather. But people would travel. Waiting for the thing. We got TCU playing Oklahoma in the Holiday Bowl. Sweet. Sounds good. I think that'd be fun. And Holiday Bowl would probably have have USC playing Clemson in the Holiday Bowl. Could you imagine that? Week 1 here in San Diego would be great. You already have people here for tourism, so that's where that kind of backfires. But at the same time, it's either you move the bowl games to week 1 or you don't have bowl games at all. I mean, that's just kind of what we're at right now. So again, week 0, FCS. Week 1, potential bowl game. 2 and 3, part of your schedule. Again, you have buys mixed in. Play a Power 5 school, Power 4 school if you're a Power 4 team. Play a Group of 5 school, Group of 6, whatever. And then you start your conference play. You play everybody in your division. And then you got the rotator at the end. You have automatic qualifiers, 24-team bracket. You play at the schools for the first couple of rounds. And then you get to your New Year's 6 bowl locations that everybody loves so much to finish it out. It would be great. First round matchups. Again, this was based on what I put this together from last year's results, setting up the leagues and the schedules, to this year's results in terms of the records. I mean, you would have a round 1 game, Colorado hosting Clemson. Then you'd have the lousy 9-24 game where Alabama plays Jacksonville State, but as a conference champion, I believe you deserve to be in. Boise State plays Arizona State. Tennessee hosts Washington State. SMU hosting South Carolina. Ole Miss hosting the Raging Cajuns of Louisiana. Georgia playing Miami of Ohio. Again, be a lousy game on paper, but you never know. That's why you play the games. Texas A&M hosting Army. Oregon with the bye, BYU with the bye, Penn State, Indiana, Texas, Notre Dame, Miami, Ohio State. Again, this is before yesterday's results. Play it out. You'd have Texas A&M potentially at Ohio State, Georgia at Miami, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, SMU, Texas, Tennessee, Indiana, Boise State, Penn State, Alabama, BYU, Colorado, Oregon. I mean, there's be great games. That's how I think college football should go. Get committees out of it. Get people out of it. Get the biases out of it. Because this week everything's going to be like, well, Alabama at 3 losses deserves to be in over Indiana. Indiana went 11-1, guys. I mean, it's 10-1. They'll beat Purdue. They'll go 11-1. If they lose to Purdue, then fine, kick them out. But you could only play the games that are in front of you and what you schedule. So that's how I would do it. They should be pregame games. They should be preseason games, Jake, or week 1 games. 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. I'm going to take a phone call before we dive into some Padres stuff. Let's get out to Kevin in Chula Vista. Kevin, what's going on?
Good morning, Commissioner. How are you doing?
Doing well. You know what? I had to do my entire – I didn't use the Kevin in Chula Vista line with the brown paper bag and taking the tour. I thought about it. But, as you pitch the stadium ideas, I'll pitch the conference realignment and college football playoff ideas.
Good for you. No, someday we will have to meet up and go take a venture over to Montgomery Field and look at 650 acres going to waste that the city of San Diego owns. I hear all these excuses about, it's an executive airport and all that crap, and it's making no money for the city. But anyway, put that aside. 3 things. Number one, your proposal for early preseason bowl games. Here's the problem if you listen to Mark Neville of the Holiday Bowl. These bowl games were put together, Braden, if you remember, for one big reason: the money that comes in late in the calendar year when tourism, especially in San Diego, is at a lull. So
right. Did you miss that part of my spiel?
I didn't hear it, but nonetheless,
yes,
I
got a buddy that's a Red Jacket, and he's told me the whole thing. And I you know what? It makes sense. That's why bowl games exist, right? I mean, get tourism late in the year when people don't travel to very nice weather destinations like San Diego when you pick it up. That's the whole reason why it was put in. I think that it was a great idea, but I think it's run its course at this point in time.
Well, I would just play devil's advocate with you. If you're going to have these late summer games, this is the peak travel season, and people are going to be paying through the nose. Maybe they will. I don't know. But I think that it's going to get a tepid response from the business folks, because the business folks are the ones that call the shots here, and they want these bowl games to make money when they have the least amount of it. So let's put that aside for a second. Quick note on the Padres, and I want to talk about Sean Lewis if I can.
Yeah.
We don't know, honestly, if we go through these mental brain gymnastics every offseason with the Padres, but the fact of the matter is, unless you've got an inside or anybody's got an inside line to AJ and what they're really looking at, what the money really is available, nobody knows. And we're not going to know much about the Padres until we get to late March, as it was last year and the year before that and the year before that. That's just the way baseball operates. The Padres are not any different from any other team. So I don't know what they're going to do, what they want to do, because they don't come forward with a lot of information. That's their right. But the mental gymnastics we go through, we need to put a little asterisk by it and just continually say, we don't know because we don't have the information. Let's put that aside for a second. Sean Lewis troubles me. I read his quotes in the paper this morning, and to paraphrase, "Don't worry, be happy" is the message. I don't know how you can't worry about a team that is parallel to Chuck Long at this point statistically. When you come up and you're at the 10th or 11th game of the season, and your team is stroking out with over 100 yards in penalties, still, that tells me a few things. And I'm not a football coach. I'm not an insider. I don't know. But as a fan, that tells me a few things. Number one, either the 48 players that you put in there are the wrong players, or not enough of the right ones, or your system does not fit the 48 players, or all of the above. Neither one has a good answer here. And for him to say, "Don't worry, be happy," essentially, everything's fine, we're going in the right direction, defies logic here. And what this coach and this staff needs to say is, our play is unacceptable. And we have to do a better job at coaching these kids, because at the 11th game of the season, they're not getting it. And for whatever reason, you're going to have to try to sell this thing next year. I can only imagine what the season ticket drop-off is going to be. This is not any longer a singular problem of price or schedule. This is now going to be a bit of a eyebrow raiser towards a crisis of confidence in that coaching staff and whether or not this guy really knows what he's doing. And I think that's a fair question to ask given the results that we have, this late in the season when we should be seeing a progression upwards and a competitiveness of quality upwards instead of a constant, really nosedive regression at the end. That's how I see it.
Well, a couple of things, Kevin. I'm gonna tell you what's going on with high school youth and college football right now. The players have all the power, and when the players have all the power, you can't hold players accountable because they're just going to say, "Well, forget you, I'm out of here." And on top of that, I do agree. I mean, their play is not very good. They don't have very good players, Kevin. They just don't. In the grand scheme of college football, they don't have very good players, and they will not have very good players in college football because they can't afford to pay for good players in college football. And when they go out and they go get, 3-star recruits out of high school, if they try to develop said players, they're going to leave for more money, and so now you got to start over again anyway. My biggest defense on Sean Lewis, and you bring up all great questions. These are all questions that should be answered. The thing with Sean Lewis is you really can't judge Sean Lewis until you see what he does in a full recruiting cycle because he inherited this team, and he's not going to change everything based on just this one team when you are going to have to reset everything again the next year for anybody that might potentially come back. The reality is for San Diego State is they got to have to find a way to basically teach 40 brand new players every single year because they're never going to be able to keep anybody that's good, and they're never going to be able to put together a team where they could, develop players. I mean, this is happening with every college football team right now. Take a look at Arizona State's head coach. They've done a great job. After the win yesterday, he said, you guys better start paying money to these kids or they're all going to leave and we can't run it back next year. There's a lot of problems that are really outside of Sean Lewis's control. And the whole thing, and I agree. I mean, the penalties are unacceptable. I think, the narrative of kind of being like, everything's fine and stuff, I don't like that either. But in this day and age of college football, if he doesn't say that stuff, he's just going to have a bunch of people walk out the door. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe you don't want those players. But when you're San Diego State, you can't find players. You can't go get some of the best players in the country or get some of those guys that have that chip on their shoulder. It's a weird breed, and there's just so many kids like that in college football. It's in high school. I mean, you see it in high school all the time. We are doing a bad job as a society in training these kids for the next level, and it's a big reason quarterback play in the NFL is lousy. I mean, we don't set up any of these kids for success or how to handle adversity. I mean, it's amazing for me as a coach to see the level of the last couple of years, and I'm seeing it. It's not just with my program, but even the best programs. The kids' lack of ability to handle adversity and to be able to take on anything that doesn't go their way without immediately transferring, quitting, or going somewhere else. It's really a gigantic problem with society. So, without going on a longer diatribe, all those questions are very fair. I think Sean Lewis, you got to give him a full year to bring in players that fit his system, let him go out and do the recruiting thing. And you know what? This year is just kind of like, let's see what we could do with what we got. But they just don't have a lot. I do question only playing one running back. I do question that. That doesn't make any sense to me. I know that's his guy from previous schools, and he's a senior. Whatever. I mean, I that one's the most head scratching, but they're doing the best they can with what they got. The biggest problem for San Diego State, I am seriously concerned about this program, is just until that athletic department can really figure out of like, we're going to have to go all in on this. They're trying to play catch up right now with all these schools. It's really dire. Now, that being said, I've talked to multiple people in multiple athletic departments about college athletics, and this gigantic swing of big schools having all this NIL money and being able to pay more, all of this stuff is going to start to level itself out when we start getting, and they're saying it's coming in the next couple of years. It might be within 5 years. But multiple athletic directors and people in athletic departments have talked about contracts are coming. that's going to help out a lot of these schools where you're going to sign these kids and they're going to be stuck with your school for 3 years so you can start developing again. They're putting salary caps in with college athletics. A lot of the money is going to come from the colleges now and not being asked from NIL. I'm sure they'll have some separate stuff behind the scenes, but a lot of it's going to level itself back out where you're going to go more to the traditional sense of, San Diego State's going to be at the same level of competition with their conference. Are they ever going to be at the top level? Not unless that athletic department really wants to go after it. And until they decide that they do, they will never be, that top echelon program. But in the next couple of years, everything that's currently an excuse that I'm giving Sean Lewis hopefully will go away. But they have a lot of problems at San Diego State. And unfortunately for Sean Lewis and his staff, a lot of them, they can't really have the ability to control.
Two quick things before I go here. You brought up the really good point about this program, like others, is going to have a turnover issue every single year. That's the way it's structured now. So I would come back and say to that, Braden, that's absolutely true. So the real question becomes, can your system be adapted quickly with constant turnover? And so he brought these 48 kids in, or how many of there were. No one's expecting undefeated. No one's expecting, I wasn't even expecting 500 this year, actually. But when you continually go out there and shoot yourself in the foot every single game, you've got a couple things you got to look at if you're a coaching staff. Either your system is not being adapted well by your players, and that could be a continuing problem because you're going to have all this turnover, so you're in a two-edged sword. I get it. So, I understand he needs more time. But what troubles me is that I don't see, and I think anyone that looks at this fairly and objectively would look at this and say, at this point in time, why are we looking at over 100 yards in penalties? Why are we looking at a lot of the same mistakes that are basic fundamental football items here that don't seem to get better? They seem to get worse at this point. So that's what I'm looking for in a coaching staff. I want to get this team to progressively improve and not regress. Having said that, the final thing, you're absolutely right. In 5 years, you're going to see a lot of Division I football programs go bye-bye because there's no guardrails in this mess that's right now. And you spent the last hour highlighting a lot of the mess. And you're absolutely right. I fear for my school that I've graduated from and been alumni from for many years, it may not make the musical chairs when it's all said and done here because they have picked the absolute worst time to tank this program. And so, they've got to stop hyping what isn't there. This whole idea about Aztec Fast left us with the insinuation, the impression that what was coming in was going to be better than what was going out. And right now, you look at the end results, you can't say that. And that's a problem. That's a real marketing problem. That's a credibility problem that they're going to have to deal with.
Yep, and I'm gonna see what they got coming up their sleeve with the recruiting period, and we'll see what they could put together. And again, a lot of those guys they got in the transfer portal, or they unfortunately they don't have the money to offer what everybody else can offer in the transfer portal, and the fact that it has to come from the fans and the alumni is absolutely asinine. I mean, could you imagine? I keep using this comparison. Could you imagine if the Padres, in order to keep Fernando Tatis Jr. every year, had to ask for donations to get up to $20 million to keep him? It would never happen.
Yeah. Well, the one question remains: when this all originally started with the politicians in California that started this mess, it was believed by many of us that the TV money was supposed to solve this. This was not supposed to come from the average season ticket buyer, the fans, the alumni, the folks that go to work for a living shouldn't have to now pay $2 million, $3 million, $4 million a year for a football team on top of everything else that we pay for. Where in the hell did all of this lucrative TV money go, and why isn't that put into a pot by which all the schools can draw from? That's just a rhetorical question.
Right. You're asking all the right questions, Kevin. I appreciate it. Thanks again. Enjoy your Sunday and have a good holiday weekend with the family.
You too, Bray. All the best.
Kevin brings up a lot of good points. I mean, a lot of it, unfortunately, for San Diego State is out of their control. It's just out of their control. I mean, you're going to start seeing that with basketball. I mean, until they start throwing out more and more money, I mean, they're not going to get the guys that Gonzaga gets, right? And you're about to compete in the same conference as Gonzaga. Now, the one thing, and Jake Waters put, you can't salary cap NIL. You can't, but at the same time, they're going to start paying players from the schools based on TV revenue. That's going to be the salaries, and so you're going to be competing with the same level with teams in your conference, because schools in your conference are going to have the same type of NIL money. So if people want to just give money away, they're going to do that. But if all the players are making money and they're making significant amount of money, to give them an additional money on top of that, I mean, it's going to come to a point for a lot of people, especially rich people, where it's like, why am I going to give this kid $12 million where he's making upwards to $20 million with everything that he's getting for him to be an average quarterback? Like Michigan paying $12 million to a quarterback that is an 18-year-old in high school right now. What if he sucks? What if it doesn't work out? What if he turns into Cam Rising? What happens if he gets hurt and you're just eating money? There's only so many deals that these, rich boosters are going to do in order to make that happen. And it was already happening before. It was just under the table. At least you could see it now. And before, you had schools that were able to compete that were a little bit less. But right now, when you have schools that barely can pay you anything or aren't paying you anything in NIL, the players got to go to other schools that are just simply paying like a couple of grand. And that's what happened to a lot. It happens a lot in college basketball. Happened to a couple of USD players. End up going to other schools in the Big West because they happen to be able to pay where USD could not. On top of the free education that they're getting. They got the best deal. If you're a college athlete right now, you got the best of both worlds. You got all the pros. You got all the pros of being a professional and all the pros of being an amateur and none of the cons. None of the cons. But those are coming quickly because the big people at top that make all the money are going to start getting involved. You want to be a pro? Here's how you be a pro. Honestly, it could probably solve the bowl game problem. You want your money at the end of the year? You got to play in the bowl game. I mean, there's going to be stipulations like that. These contracts and 3-year contracts are going to be interesting to see. It's going to be for both sides, though. Sign a 3-year deal, right? Let's say we take the kid that just signed with Michigan, right? 4 years, $12 million. He shows up. He's just not good. He's just on the team. You're burning $12 million in your pocket. The whole thing of NIL is it was supposed to, help out. It was supposed to eliminate the BS of like some swimmer having a cool YouTube show about bird watching that makes money, and all of a sudden she has to give it up because she's going to college to swim. That's utterly ridiculous. And now it's turned into, we're just going to pay kids to play as boosters. We're going to pretend it's NIL. I mean, NIL was designed to be like, what Olympians get, right? When an Olympian goes out and wins a bunch of gold medals and now he's in the McDonald's commercial. You couldn't do that as an amateur. But now you had the ability to do it. That was your name, image, and likeness. Your name, image, and likeness is not showing up every Saturday in an Indiana uniform. But they didn't put any rules in place. So now it's all a gigantic cluster. Parity in college football is good. All this other stuff is nonsense. Millions of dollars. I mean, there's kids that are making more money in college than professional football players are. That have to play every day, that they can't be traded, they can't enter the transfer portal, all this stuff. It's better to be a college player than to be a pro player. Insane. But eventually people are going to stop doing it because it just doesn't make any sense. There's only so many times you can get burned paying an 18-year-old a ton of money, especially when you see them act like children after they lose. I mean, did you see how Jackson Dart acted yesterday? I mean, talk about not being a professional at all. And you wonder why you wonder why NFL quarterback play has gone to absolute crap. We're way overdue for a break. I'm Braden Surprenant. It's the Braden Surprenant Show. Back with a couple more segments on 97.3 The Fan. Brady Soprano Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning. A fall, chilly morning for all of you throughout San Diego. We're leading up to a holiday, and it's cold outside. My drive to work, I barely saw anybody on the road. So, appreciate all of you for joining us today. Early morning for myself, but a long day. I'll be at USD later this afternoon. USD men's basketball against the Idaho Vandals. Game starts at 2 o'clock. So we got some local college basketball in town. Talk a lot of college football today. A lot of people weighing in on college football at just the craziness that it is. Had some college football ideas, how to fix college football. Not that it's broken, but there are a lot of problems with college football. I just think we got to get rid of humans from deciding who makes the playoff. I mean, we're going to have this week of takes on ESPN and all of the national news outlets that cover college football that want to talk about the playoff on social media and everything like that. They're going to have horrific takes all day, all week long. This SEC team deserves to be in over Indiana. They're way better than Indiana with one loss, even though Indiana's one loss is only to Ohio State. So, looks like the sun's starting to peek through the clouds. Blue Meanie in the chat says, it's a beautiful day in East County. It's a little rainy and cloudy here in Serra Mesa still, but it's always beautiful in East County. Hardly any cloud cover out there. I got to get rid of, yes. No, we're not. We need robots competing in sports now, Blue Meanie. No, I'm talking about get the human element out of determining who makes the playoff. Let the players in the field decide. I talked about the Padres, that I was going to talk about the Padres. I'm going to dive into it very quickly because we got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get you the actives and inactives in the NFL to start your fantasy lineups. I mean, the thing with the Padres for me, and we spend 4 hours a day on this. It's just, I just hope that they don't think that last year working out, and it worked out. It was great. It was a great job by A.J. Preller and company in putting together a team for the budget that they had. I just don't want them to get complacent in a sense that that's our formula going forward, that we can win, by cutting payroll and kind of nickel and dime. I don't want to see the Padres go back to that. So, I mean, right now, they're already over the luxury tax. They keep saying they want to be under that. I can't imagine them being able to put together a competitive team in which you're not over the luxury tax. If you're going to do that, you're going to have to ship off a lot of players. So unless they're going to ship off players and reload this roster with just a bunch of brand new faces, I think it's going to be very difficult to do for the Padres. And until we kind of get a sense of where they're at with offers, and it can kind of paint the picture of what they're willing to spend, or we start getting some rumors out there from our local reporters, I don't know how you attack the offseason. And here's the thing. I mean, nobody's flying off the board right now. I mean, I would be surprised if anybody signs before the winter meetings. In fact, I hope I curse that into existence. I hope that's a cold take. Cold take exposed. Nobody's going to sign to the winter meetings. I hope that's a cold take. Let's get this thing going. But until you start to understand, or the Padres start to show a little bit of their cards based on how they act and not what they say in the offseason, which happens every year, it's hard to start going like, hey, maybe they should get this guy. Maybe they should get this guy. Maybe they should get this guy. I mean, we went through the tiers the other day on Andy and Elston. They can't afford anybody if they want to stay underneath the luxury tax or right at it. They can't. Which means you can't make any improvements on the free agent market. The only guy you can get is Roki Sasaki. If Sasaki wants to be a Padre, he'll be a Padre. He has all freedom of choice in this particular deal because money's not a problem. Everybody's going to be offering the same kind of contract. So then it comes down to like trades, but even with trades, you got to pay money. Cody Bellinger might get traded. The Cubs want to trade Cody Bellinger. He signed a big deal. I mean, you got to, at least with money. I don't think it's years. I think he ended up re-signing with the Cubs, right? But it's not like he's getting $10 million. Cody Bellinger's getting 27.5. You can't trade for him unless the Cubs pay for more than half of that, which they're not going to do. Really painting in the corner the Padres are with their payroll if they're not going to spend like their previous owner was spending in Peter Seidler. So it's going to be hard. You're going to get a lot of, just hope for the best when you sign guys like, Donovan Solano and players like, veteran players looking for another opportunity. But I agree with Nate. I think everybody is I think everybody's kind of waiting for Juan Soto to sign before everybody starts signing. I understand like his value. I can't believe anybody would pay him anything more than what Ohtani got. He doesn't pitch. I mean, Ohtani pitches. And is one of the best baseball players to ever live. I just hope it doesn't get to a point where like the Dodgers or the Globetrotters and everybody else is just their traveling circus. And if Major League Baseball allows that, thinking it's going to make them money, I got bad news for them. It's going to turn off a lot of people in the United States. It might excite Japan, but who has done a great job with ratings and everything and sponsorships. I mean, Japan is all in on Major League Baseball. MLB has done a great job of making, Japan part of their deal now, right? And starting to spread baseball throughout the world. But you don't have a salary cap and you have this luxury tax that rich teams don't care about because they make so much money it doesn't even matter. And they just go, we're just going to buy all the best players. Jim Bowden said that on the Boone podcast. I mean, he thinks that the Dodgers are like have a legitimate chance of signing Juan Soto. I mean, if that happens, great. It's going to make baseball awful to watch for a lot of markets aside from LA. So very interesting to see how that plays out. 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. When we come back, actives, inactives for the National Football League as kickoff starts in about 17 minutes for your morning games. I'm Braden Soprano. It's Braden Soprano Show live and local each every Sunday morning from 8 to 10. San Diego's number one sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Braden Surprenant Show, final segment. San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. We got NFL coming up very shortly. Last second to get your lineups set. Let's take a look at who's active and who's inactive. All right. Actives and inactives for fantasy football purposes as we get you ready for Sunday football. A great Sunday show nationally on 97.3 The Fan where they go around the league. Coming up right after this show, let's talk about the 10 a.m. games. Couple of inactives for you and actives. We'll start with the Carolina Panthers. They got a lot. Jalen Coker is inactive today. He was added to the injury list on Friday. Not surprised that he can't go today. He is going to be inactive for the Carolina Panthers. I know a lot of people have picked him up in the last couple of weeks. He is inactive today for the Carolina Panthers. Other actives and inactives for the Panthers. Jonathan Brooks, running back, will be active and debut on Sunday and eat into Chuba Hubbard's workload. If you got Jonathan Brooks starting, might want to flip somebody else in there. Eddie Pinheiro, kicker for Carolina, is active today. Injured while celebrating the Panthers' last win. He should be good to go. Miles Sanders is out on the IR. His absence means Brooks is in line for a lot of snaps. Adam Thielen is activated from the IR, but was limited in practice all week. He has been listed as active. It is possible he only plays in a reduced capacity, though. Chicago Bears, DeAndre Swift, active with a groin injury. Full Friday practice. Made it likely that Swift was going to play, but the carry split with Roschon Johnson is still up in the air. Keenan Allen, active with an ankle injury. Roma Dunze and DJ Moore would have to pick up the slack if Allen, who got hurt on Friday, falters during their game against Minnesota. Jake Ferguson out with a concussion. Luke Schoonmaker or Ravenspan Ford if you're really desperate for a tight end. If you have Jake Ferguson, he's out with a concussion. Brandon Cooks out with a knee injury. He's on the IR. He was not activated from IR. CeeDee Lamb is the only Dallas Cowboys receiver with any fantasy value today at all. Kansas City, Isaiah Pacheco out IR. Chiefs say they'll wait one more week before activating Pacheco, meaning Kareem Hunt will get the number one running back carries today. In Minnesota, Josh Oliver, tight end, is out with a wrist. New York Giants, Malik Neighbors is active with his groin injury. Mike Evans, active with a hamstring. Barring a pregame setback, Evans was always going to play in this game. He should be fine. Tennessee Titans, Tajay Spears out with concussion. Tony Pollard gets another week to dominate the backfield touches in Tennessee. And Austin Seibert, kicker for Washington, is active today with a hip injury. Zane Gonzalez is back to the practice squad as Seibert gets ready to return to kicking duties. In the afternoon, we do have a couple of active and inactives all ready to report before they get to even pregame warm-ups. Afternoon games, Denver's Josh Reynolds is out with a hand injury. Next week might finally be the time for Reynolds to return. Devon Vele and Lil Jordan Humphrey keep their minimal fantasy value for now. Alexander Madison, running back for the Las Vegas Raiders, is doubtful. It looks like a combination of Amir Abdullah and Zamir White might be potential, but Zamir White is doubtful with a quad. So Amir Abdullah and Dylan Laube will be the thrust into the running back spotlight for Vegas. Noah Fant is questionable with a groin injury, the tight end for Seattle. Tyler Lockett is questionable with a foot injury, receiver for the Seahawks as well. Brock Purdy out with a shoulder injury this afternoon. He will start this week and potentially next week as Brandon Allen will start this week and potentially next week as well. Temper expectations for all 49ers receivers. In terms of the Sunday night game for the Eagles, Devontae Smith out with a hamstring injury. Jahan Dotson will see action alongside A.J. Brown, potentially. That's a look again, sure, actives and inactives for an NFL Sunday, Week 12, as we get closer and closer to that. Hopefully everybody is going to enjoy their holiday weekend as we got a minute left in the show. It's been great talking with all of you. Today, we're going to have the America's Finest Football Show, the last of America's Finest Football Show, coming up tomorrow as we recap the high school football season, get you a preview for the CIF championship games. We'll also talk some more college football tomorrow night from 10 to midnight. If you haven't tuned in yet, it's been a fun show each and every Monday night from 10 to midnight, so we'll have that show for you tomorrow. Be sure, if you missed any of the college football talk we had today and you want to dive into the craziness that was college football, tune in to the podcast form of this show wherever you get your podcasts. We are listed as the Braden Soprenet Show. And we are, again, wherever you get your podcast. So, again, be sure to give us a subscription. If you're on the YouTube chat, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our page. Appreciate all the followers out there. I saw Rod in the chat talking about his Alabama Crimson Tide tough loss last night. So that was, I don't know if I agree with you that they don't deserve to be in the playoff. I think it's going to be crazy in college football. We got some pretty good games today in the National Football League. As I mentioned, with all the actives and inactives, taking a look at some of the big games today. Keep your eye on. There are some lousy games as well. Cowboys, Commanders. The Commanders are favored by 11 in this game. Cooper Rush versus the Commanders, not going to be very good. Other games for you that might be lopsided. Lions and Colts, although the spread's knocked down to a Detroit 7-point favorite. Patriots at Dolphins in the 10 a.m. hour. Miami's favored by 7 in that game. Vikings will play the Bears coming up. That should be a pretty good game. Vikings were favored by 3 at 10 in the morning. Buccaneers at the New York Giants at 10 in the morning. That will be a 6-point spread for Tampa Bay. Chiefs will be in Carolina to take on the Panthers. Titans at Texans. And that'll wrap up your morning slate. We got some NFL football coming to your airwaves right here on 97.3 The Fan. Thanks again for making our morning a part of yours. Be sure to subscribe and like us on wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll be back not next week, but the following week. We're off next week for the holiday. Have a happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. We'll see you next time.